Welcome, Warrior Sages. Today we have a very beautiful being, a man of great embodied wisdom. I've had the opportunity over the last just few minutes to receive his sadhana, his depth, his silence. The depth of his experience comes through in a very powerful, gentle, and very noble way. This is Richard Rudd, who is the author of the famous book called Gene Keys, which I'm going to ask him to share about, which is a profound, if you will, new addition to this time and this place to support our evolution, on all levels of our being. So thank you so much, Richard, for being with us. This group, this community is called Warrior Sage. It happens to be a group of varied philosophies, but individuals all committed to action, wisdom, love, awakening, and arising together. So thanks for being here, brother.
Thank you. My kind of place, my kind of people.
So I'd love to just start off with what's going on right now. And I'd love to just ask you, we're in this very tumultuous time of great expansion, great stillness, many things, volatility, roller coaster ride. What's your sense of what's going on right now, please?
Yeah, thank you. It's a nice place to begin. In 2009, I wrote this book, The Gene Keys, and it wrote itself through me, and it was a deep contemplation. It took 7 years of contemplating essentially the codes in the I Ching, and then I rewrote. It was a rewriting, if you like, of the I Ching, but from a completely different place, and when I wrote it wrote itself randomly. It didn't write itself in any sequence. But when I came to one of the I call them gene keys, 64 gene keys. When I came to one of them, the number 55, it kind of exploded inside me. It was an odd one, and it was about 5 times longer than any of the others. And I just gave myself to it, and entered into the deep contemplation of it. And essentially it spoke of this time. It spoke of this changing time that we're in. And it's the code for freedom. That's its word, freedom. And it's about moving from being a victim to being free. And that's on all levels. But there's more to it even than that, because as I unpacked it as a transmission, because it's a transmission, and my teachings are living transmission. I refer to them as living transmissions rather than like knowledge. They're wisdom. They're a living wisdom, and you have to embody it and live it and implement it. And I'm an ordinary person. I'm not some sage on a mountaintop. I'm an ordinary guy in a family with mortgage and all those things that ordinary guys have. But there's this wisdom, and this notion of this epoch that we're moving into, from one epoch to another. It doesn't happen very often that we shift epochs, and an epoch is a vast span of time. So as I went into this code, this universal code, because there's, as some of you will probably know from the I Ching, there are 64 of these, and they relate to a code that's woven throughout life. So our genetic code is woven out of 64 codons, but also the universe as a musical creation, as a tonal creation, is also woven out of these octaves, these 8 octaves. And we see it in the architecture of life through the phi spiral and all these things. You see this 64. It's even the foundation of our modern technology, 64-bit technology. So it's everywhere, right? So drilling into these codes are like what I did and what I've been doing. And so that one opened up in me, and it spoke of this time. And there was a prophecy contained in it, and I was a bit uncomfortable when I started to write that and really contemplate it. I thought that I'm going to have to step into a different pair of shoes if I'm going to stand behind that. So for the last however many years, 10 years or so or longer, I've been kind of talking about this time coming, and I'm continuing to talk about this time coming because it's still coming. And I think, you know, for many of us, you know, we may be like, it's very tempting to focus on the, you know, the details of the change itself. And I find, you know, it's really useful to pan way out and look at the whole deep cycle that we're in, from what I call deep time. You look at it from deep time and see that, you know, all life goes through these kind of crisis points, these choke points. It always is. It's part of our individual lives. It's a part of cellular life. It's a part of the life of the cosmos, these initiations. And I think probably most people listening to this, if you're warrior sages, then you will know this very well, that we're at the edge of one of these choke points. In fact, we're in it. And the way I understand it is that it kind of operates in the same way as the birth, as a birth of a child operates, through contractions. You know, and a big contraction comes, and then you're just possessed, or the mother is completely possessed by that, the power of that contraction. You know, you try and have a conversation with a mother having a contraction,
No.
you're not going to get very far.
Or you ask it to stop or go away.
Yeah. And it's like, it's just overwhelmingly powerful. And then there's a moment of respite, you know, and the breath comes back, and you're like, and you wait and you wait, and you're in that period, and then whatever happens in that period happens, and then there's another contraction, and each time it gets more powerful and more powerful. And so I think that's, you know, my answer to where we are now at a deeper level. And we can explore any of the details of it, but I think that's the, you know, I mean, what came from me in that gene key is this wonderful symbol, and I wrote about it in my book, and it's on the front now of all my books and my website, everywhere, little dragonflies. Because the dragonfly for me is this wonderful allegory of this transition that we're in, because we move, the dragonfly, unlike little different from the caterpillar and the butterfly, little different, same story. But the dragonfly moves from water to air as opposed to earth to air. And for me, that seems even more distant, because it lives underwater as an underwater predator for 2 or 3 years, this other creature, you know, this nymph, and then it comes out of the water environment one day, and it climbs up a stalk of grass or a reed, and it's never done that before. It's never been in the air. It's like a fish. It's an underwater creature, you know. And then it comes out into the air, and the sunlight, you know, some gene inside it causes it to do this, and then the sun starts to work
Changes
on
the
it.
whole breathing apparatus as well.
Exactly. And then this incredible transformation happens, and it happens incredibly fast. It actually happens much faster than the butterfly. You know, it happens in hours, you know, and this dragonfly emerges, this iridescent creature of the air, and it takes to the air. And if you think about like the difference between that underwater creature and that flying, you know, amazing insect, they are just poles apart. And it's the same for us. You know, it's very difficult for us to imagine what we're going to become, because it has very little resemblance to what we are now. And we're in that stage, you know, we're in that stage of crawling up there, and no one knows what the hell is going on. Just like the dragonfly larva, probably sitting there going, what the hell is going on? My back is splitting open.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess that's one answer.
Yes. The wave, the feeling, many of our friends have come to share are feeling the same parallel in their own unique way.
Yeah.
Expressed in many times, you know, in the yogic tradition, the ending of Kali Yuga, which is the time of most contraction and birthing of brand new. I would love to ask you to go into more detail about our time now, and how do you see us emerging from this, please?
Well, I would, this is my take. I think we're going to go through a worldwide environmental catastrophe. you know, I really think that's what's on the cards. I think that it's going to be an environmental catastrophe, really, a global, global warming. As those temperatures rise, it changes the structure of life at the deepest level. So what we're seeing with the beginnings of these extinctions, is the breaking apart of the chains of life. All these different chains that are interconnected. Like, take the insects, because I mentioned dragonflies. Like, once large numbers of insects start dying and disappearing from the chains, then the whole, they're critical. Insects, they're the major part of the biomass of our planet. So as as we reach these tipping points, it's like water boiling. It kind of slowly comes to a boil, and then it's, you almost can't see it, and then suddenly it accelerates very, very rapidly, and then you have a completely different state. And I think that's what we're looking at. And I was saying to a friend yesterday, I was saying, like, God, it feels like we're sitting on the porch, still drinking a glass of lemonade, and there's this tornado coming, and we're behaving. I mean, I can understand, totally empathize. Most people don't see it coming. And I'm not a fatalist or a nihilist or anything like that. But I just feel like there's going to be, I think the pandemic is veil one being removed, and veil two is probably going to be the breaking down of the economy. That's the byproduct of the pandemic. And I don't think anyone's really very few people are really looking at that in detail. And I think that things are going to collapse. I think that it's going to be very frightening for a lot of people, for most people, because, we have this inherent fear of death and fear of dying, because most of us, that's our reality. We think this is it. We're here in this, and the quivering of this. If I lose this, or if I lose that, my son, my brother, my mother, and so we're so caught in these vehicles that, we don't feel that freedom. And that freedom that's coming, I can talk about how bad I think it's going to be, but, it'll probably be worse. But, what's on the other side of it?
Those are just the beginnings. As one topples, one system starts to topple the other system.
Yeah.
And at least for us as humanity, it's going to be, we're the least important of the whole chain, as you said. The biomass of the insect kingdom is far more valuable, than we are.
Well, I don't know if it's more valuable, but it's more critical, for sure.
Yes.
It really is.
Yes.
But it's, I take your point. And I think the human being is an incredible thing. And then the thing that came for me in the gene keys and in this one I was talking about, the 55, is what I've begun to see in it is a genetic mutation taking place, an actual genetic mutation, a transmutation in our species and in many species. And that mutation will lead to a forking of our species, as it has done in the past. So we've reached these forks, and they occasionally occur, and they've occurred because of massive crises, or they've occurred because of cataclysm, or a meteorite hitting the earth, or some huge thing, some huge event. And they happen in evolutionary terms very quickly indeed as well. And one of the things that I've learned about mutations in species is there's certain things that you need in order for a mutation to occur. One of them is heat. You need increased heat.
Interesting.
Right? So you've got to have a hotter planet for it to happen. The other one is you need chaos. I mean, it's not that you need it, but that is the environment of it.
Yes.
So a transmutation, it's like the dragonfly or the butterfly, that's like before it becomes that, all those cells just crack apart.
Yes.
So the whole genetic structure has to go through a mutation, a change. A lot of what's old falls away. It just drops away. It's debris. It's no longer needed. Another thing that often happens is it often happens through over-proliferation. So as a species over-proliferates, in a way, you could look at it like it creates as much genetic diversity as it possibly can, so that it can then go through a culling process and it can select out of that huge diversity, the consciousness, the intelligence can select exactly the ingredients it needs to create the new vehicle. So it needs as wide a panoply of genetic material as possible. So over-proliferation is another one. Heat is another one. Chaos is another one. And it all happens really fast. And so what I've seen is a new species, like we were Neanderthal, and then we split, and then Cro-Magnon came, and these forks appear in our evolution if we look backwards in time. And I think we're at another one of those, at the cusp of one. And the next species, I mean, my cute name for it is Homo Sanctus, but the sacred human, because I think the next human has a completely different operating system. And that operating system allows us to see that we're actually a collective, so we become a collective entity, not lots of humans, one human, but operating through the rich diversity of individual genius, but coupling together in different forms and uniquenesses to create, to steward this planet fully in a new way. The eyes of Gaia, if you like, or the heart of Gaia, or, those kind of metaphors. So I see something, I've seen for a long time, something really glorious coming, but a hell of a journey. Birth is a heck of a journey.
Yes. Thank you for that, Richard. That's beautiful. It's terrifying on one level. It's terrifying as a father, as a husband, as a man.
Yeah.
And on a transpersonal level, it's exciting. It's from the deep time perspective, it's oh, but of course, and how natural, and how this is the perfect timing. And I believe for all of us, it's really valuable to be able to hold the pragmatic, who am I right here? What is mine to do, not do? How am I part of this great unfolding? To come into alignment with that, as well as to recognize our temporal nature. And yes, it sucks. On a human level, when it's someone really close to us, and at a macro level, it's the most natural part of our being, and to hold it all, the spectrum, and not be swung by any opposite to spiritually ascend or and lose touch with our humanity, or to be so immersed in suffering and fear that we forget the fullness, the limitless. I'd love to ask you, now coming back to the gene keys in our individual place, I'd love you to share, now you've shared this vast expanse of where we are and where we could be moving into. How does that dial into me now here today, what I'm up to?
Well, that's where Gene Keys I think that's why Gene Keys came into being, really, to help individuals, primarily, starting with individuals, and then to begin helping relationships, individuals to relate clearly, and through, forgiveness and love, and to explore relationships in depth through the heart. And then also from that to understand how the collective brain operates, as I was saying, the collective. So those three phases: individual, then relationships, then the collective. But it begins with us, with me, with I, the individual. And so the title of my book, Gene Keys, is Embracing Your Higher Purpose. And I know that there's a lot of talk about purpose, and huckster and new age guru out there is like, find your purpose. I even found one that said like, I can show you your purpose in 10 seconds or something. So when I talk about higher purpose, I see purpose as not something that we do, as something that we are. It's more about being than doing. So when you look into the gene keys and they have these words, you know, it's a word framework. You know, it uses language in a poetic, beautiful way, as a journey, to take you on a journey to learn about your gene keys specifically. And we have these profiles, gene keys profiles, that are calculated from the time of your birth. And so they have a relationship to a lot of different systems like astrology and, you know, but it's not astrology, it's astrological data interpreted through the I Ching and through this kind of new psychological, sociological, spiritual paradigm. So you can really understand this evolutionary flow that every individual has. And so the basis, the foundation of each of the codes in the gene keys has 3 levels. You know, I give them, the words have 3 levels. They have a shadow level, which is the word that represents the victim consciousness of that key. So if I give you an example, gene key 6, always the one I seem to come up with. Gene key 6 is the shadow of conflict. It's all about conflict. And in the original I Ching also, they called it friction, and they had different words, but conflict, and that's the shadow. And there's a gift inside every shadow, though. So inside that shadow, hiding is a gift. And the gift of conflict is diplomacy, right? So for you to really understand conflict, that's its purpose, is to teach us the art of communication diplomatically, to work, to listen, to learn to listen, what's mine, what's yours, how to be able to get along with someone, how to be able to really, dialogue in
the light side of the shadow.
Yeah. So therefore conflict then has a purpose. And then it also, the third level is called, there was no word in English for this, so I borrowed from Sanskrit the word siddhi, meaning divine gift. And these are so in that instance, the siddhi would be peace. So you go from conflict to diplomacy to peace. And it looks like a ladder, but actually you could see it as concentric circles, or you could see it as, like, one way I like to see it as seed, flower, fruit, So the shadow is the seed, and then it flowers into the gift, and then the gift drops the fruit, which is the siddhi. And the siddhi, and also what I love is that the fruit contains the seed, and the seed contains the fruit. So the beginning and the end contain each other. So therefore, the whole Gene Keys work is about working with your shadows. That's where it begins. It's about going down into the difficulties of our life, the challenges of our life, and mining them and drawing out the sustenance. Because in those shadows lies our higher purpose. That is our higher purpose. It's hiding in those, in wherever you are. If you're listening to this right now, think right now, think to yourself, what is the hardest thing in my life right now? What is the hardest thing? The thing that I find hardest, most struggling with? That thing there is where your greatest gift is lying. And that's where life wants you to look, right? It wants you to work there. It wants you to dig. It wants you to put on your mining helmet and your pickaxe and get in there and have the courage. But, if you're a warrior, you go into those places and you really look inside yourself, how that operates, how that shadow operates. And then you begin to open it up and you find its gift. And as the more you find its gift, out of that gift comes creative action. It'll actually, it wants to do something in the world. The shadow keeps you kind of locked away, right? The gift takes you out. It takes you to connect with people. It takes you to, create relationships. And the siddhi, that connects you with the unified state, So all the words for the 64 siddhis are the same state. They're different words for the unified state. So it might be compassion, might be peace, might be, a lot of different words, devotion, depends on the frame of reference that's built and coded into your genetic architecture. So in a way, that's what Gene Keys is representing as a journey. It's like, it shows you your route to the enlightened state, to the unified state. And it also shows you your style within the unified state, which is really interesting, because you might not think, we often don't think like that. We think, but actually when you think about it and you listen to like 10 different awakened beings, they are very contradictory, but the state that they each inhabit is unmistakable, right?
Absolutely.
The state is the one thing. If they all sat there in silence, you'd be like, it's the same state. But the moment they start to talk, they contradict each other, because they have different roots, different language, different gene keys, different encodements. So in a way, that's
same experience, different viewpoints.
Exactly. So that's what I mean by higher purpose. And I think that's where the journey really, higher purpose is to unlock our genius, and that genius will take us out into the world in some way.
This is amazing. This is really profound. I really love how this has all come together: the seed, the flower, the fruit, the city.
Yeah.
Brother, share with us, how did this astrological influence come into the I Ching? They seem like such, wow, like very different worlds. I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, well, actually, I still don't know anything much about astrology. I've learned a little bit over the years. But it came through one of my mentors, Ra, who was the strange man, wonderful genius, who brought together this system called human design. You may have heard of that. Mm-hmm. And he had a very powerful mystical experience in which that system was kind of given to him. And one of the things it did is it did this work for me. It placed together the I Ching with astrology. And so all I had to do was find Ra, and so on my mystical journey, I found him and had an instant, like, this is a teacher I need to sit with. And I sat in the back of his classes for years, and I never took a single note, and he just spoke from his thing and taught that system. And I just imbibed that. And eventually that became the Gene Keys. That became one of the foundational pillars of what then later became Gene Keys, which was an expansion of his language, actually. So I owe a lot to his genius in bringing those two together. But yeah, it essentially what it does is it places the I Ching, which if you look at the I Ching, traditionally you see it as a square. When you see it online, if you Google it, you usually see it in a big square.
That's right.
But actually, there are some ancient sources that put it in a circle, and you can see that as well in a wheel, because the wheel is the best way to track all cycles. All the great wisdom traditions use wheels. And so the I Ching as a wheel is a way to map with astrology. So then it's just a matter of like lining them up so that they fit. So which bit of Aries goes in which hexagram and that kind of thing, if you want to get into the details. And actually Ra was just shown that. And so it was something he was just shown. And then as he unraveled his teachings and I learned from them, you saw the perfect, impeccable nature of the revelation. Because you were just like, oh my God, it just fits so well. And people still ask me, how do you know? Why does that one go there? I don't know why. It just does. And the deeper you go into the system, the more you realize. It's like if you come into Gene Keys if you go onto genekeys.com and you get your free profile, you'll get Gene Keys, these codes that relate specifically to your life path. And it begins with your higher purpose. Right? So you'll have one Gene Key. Might be, for me, it's number 64. Do you know yours?
I don't.
You remember? No.
I did it a few years ago, so I'd have to.
Yeah, it's a while back. So mine is 64. And those codes are confusion, imagination, and illumination. That's my journey. That's my life's work journey. It begins with being hellishly confused. But out of confusion, comes imagination. You know, the release of this. Wow, what happens if I instead of like all these paints in different colors, maybe if I just start to paint instead of looking at them, why don't I just start painting with them? And then I start creating something amazing. And then you begin to realize after a while that what you've just painted wasn't even done by you. And that's when it starts to reach illumination, So unified states. Yeah.
I feel like hopping on right now and doing my gene keys again.
Well, people probably are, and it's great. It's fun. It's a very serious but very fun journey. And gene keys, people should know this is not like a quick fix. It's a journey. For you to understand, when you get that thing and you look at that sequence and all those things and those words and those patterns and you're like the geometries, you're like, oh my God, what does this all mean? It's a journey, and it's laid out in steps. And there are a lot of people who will help you kind of understand it step by step. But as you go,
are there guides, teachers, coaches that help out with this?
There are. Yeah. It's a good question. Like I've avoided for so long doing any kind of trainings because I'm not that kind of person, and Gene Keys isn't that kind of wisdom. It's not. And so people wanted me for so many years to do like, can't you train people to do it? I said, no, I can't train. I don't train people. It's not about teaching. It's about embodying. But having said that, I am just creating a guides program now. But it's I've done it in my way. Like it's a self-study. You self-certify yourself, and it doesn't train you so much as it helps you embody the essential ingredients to kind of embody the teachings. So, but there are many people, in Gene Keys community, we have a global community, connected and Facebook and stuff, there's a lot of people who've been around a long time. And we're now doing these, we call them deep dives. They're virtual retreats. I don't know if you know about these, Satyen.
Please let us know about it. Yes.
Yeah, no, they're great fun. I'm about to start a big one in November, by the way. In the very beginning of November, I'm doing the Venus one, which is about relationships and love. And I've never done that one before. So a virtual retreat, you carry on living your life. You sign up to this retreat, and it goes on in the background of your life. And sometimes it comes very much to the foreground. So the way it works is you get a kind of weekly themes that kind of come in and out, and then the actual commitment level is pretty low for each person, but it's up to you. So a minimum is like 2 hours a week or something. Yes. To like listen to this, watch this, do this meditation, some beautiful meditation set to music and stuff, taking you on the journey, and then we meet. The last one we did earlier this year, there's one on now actually running, and we had 2,500 people on the first one we did this year. Wow. And a global audience and from all around the world. And then we come together in these community calls, and you get put into groups of 5 of just random, and you get to share your journey with other people. And that was incredible, hearing people's stories as they work with the same material in the same rhythm in their life, but through their gene keys, so their shadow is different from your shadow.
Yes.
But it's the same process. So you hear the same kind of frequency of story. And so the community then starts to teach itself and inform itself, which again is this collectivity at work. We're a brain, humanity. And so, a heart brain. And so the Gene Keys is all about this. It's about putting people into processes so that this collective intelligence can come online. And the internet is obviously a wonderful way. And I have I've got an incredible team around me who have just like, they make me look so good. I don't do anything really. They do all the work.
I understand that one.
Yeah.
Brother, how can we find about that course? Same on Gene Keys.
Yeah. If you go to Gene Keys and if you get your profile, you'll be on our mailing list. And I think you have to tick the box as I'll be on the mailing list. But if you join the mailing list, then every week we put out this little email called the Pulse, and the Pulse it's really cool. It tells you the gene key of the week. And so it gives you like the global theme, the shadow of this week, and the gift, and a little thing by me, and usually a couple of other little free things that go on there. And it puts you into the pulse of what's really going on under the surface of the news headlines. And a lot of people follow that. And it's our way of keeping connected to everyone. So we haven't opened registration for the next course yet, but it's opening in about 2 weeks' time. We're expecting probably a big number. And so if you're new to Gene Keys, it's kind of diving in the deep end, because it's actually part 2 of a series, but you can join, and anyone's free to join, and you'll just have to do a little catch up, and you might want to look at part 1 as well, just to kind of get you, but it's not essential. It's because it's a journey it's about human relationships. It's about love. It's about the wounding patterns that we each carry. And it's actually the deepest part of the knowledge that I was ever given. And because it showed to me that we have algorithms built into our DNA, and they're kind of karmic algorithms, and they govern our wounding patterns in childhood. So when you understand your algorithms, so your defense patterns, your strategies that you learned as a child, it really, really unlocks something profound. So it's very tender and very powerful, because it actually creates real changes in your biology and in your relationships. And kind of you need to be a bit of a warrior to even be ready for that. Otherwise
in this day and age, we have to be warriors and do the tough stuff of really looking at, because this external reality that we have of all the chaos that you've shared about is definitely a transmission of what we're putting out there.
Yeah.
It's very simple. And the solution always starts boiling back, always comes back to us. And that's the warrior's path. It's not a matter of whether it's true or not. It's a great attitude to have resolve, to have meaning, and to bring meaning, and to be responsible for meaning. So I'm really glad it's a miracle what you've created, or what you've brought through, and that has come through you. I'm really feeling how it interconnects people's karmic past, their dharmas, their siddhis, as well as collectively. There's a group compassion around the shadows, because we see within them. We know, even if we haven't done the work, if we've done it on some other aspect of ourselves, we know that this is going to unfold in a higher meaning. That in itself dislodges, it starts to open up the tightness of the shadow and allows it to breathe and come into spacious love, spacious self-love and acceptance. But you've dialed it in, you've brought it into its minutia, into its nuance, into its subtlety, which that's the work that we need to do. I also feel now we can't just stay at the gross levels of our introspection. We have to come into the subtlety, the nuance, and build the strength in the nuance. It's those microfibers we have to build now to be a complete whole being in society.
Yeah.
What's the biggest thing for those of us who are really drawn now, to we find that we're on some form of some calling right now, some brewing is happening where it's, I need to come out in the world, I need to be bigger, I need to be more on my game. What would you share to those of us who are feeling that?
I think, one, like, that feeling is very natural and real, and it's going to get more so as things start breaking down. Like, what can I do? How can I be of service? That's a great question to live into, actually. How can I be of the greatest service? In the Gene Keys community, we ask that question all the time. How can I be of the greatest service to the whole? And you don't always have the answer, but asking the question over and over and over again, making that question the foundation of your life is what's important. And the main technique that I bring, because I haven't really mentioned any techniques, but the only technique in a way that I bring through the Gene Keys is called the art of contemplation. And those of you who kind of Google me or on Amazon, you can find that I've written the Gene Keys book and some other books, but then there's a little book that I wrote last year. It's under 100 pages called The Art of Contemplation. I did have one here, but anyway, it's my little Zen book, and it's the central technique. And in a way, it's the most vital technique that every human being needs to master. And it's an art, to know how to enter into the contemplative state, but not just to enter into it, but to live in it, and it's slightly different from like meditation, or yoga or any of those things. Like those are parts of contemplation, right? Contemplation is a bigger word. It can contain formal meditation. It can contain mindfulness, but it might not. What's your contemplative way? It's unique to you. It feels right for you, and so, contemplation is the method that we know what to do in life and how to do it and when to do it. This is like what's so, because you can't, with crisis around us, and there's fear and anxiety and all those difficult energies, and they're in the collective, and that takes a strong person to kind of stand in an anchor position. You can't think your way out of this. Like, we can't think our way through this crisis. It might be tempting, like, to think like, well, I need to kind of, get a whole lot of cans of baked beans and get on a yacht and go and live on this island over there, and then maybe I'll be safe, with my family. And actually, you can't think your way through this crisis. You can't strategize. That's the problem. That's what got us into this crisis. Strategies, right? Yes. Intuition. That's what comes from the art of contemplation. Pure intuition. And you've got to be really deeply in touch with that feminine spirit inside. And so the art of contemplation is about creating space so that can be felt and heard and lived. And it has 3 little techniques, so they're really one technique. I mean, it distilled it down to the simplest thing. So if no one else remembers anything I've said here today, just remember this one thing. The first technique, it's called pausing. Pausing couldn't be simpler, right? And I speak about harvesting pauses. Think of that, remember that. Harvest your pauses, because pauses come throughout our day all the time. They're coming to us. They're inviting us. Take a pause. But most of the time, we don't take them. We miss them. And they're like gold, So when you enter into a pause, and it can be like a pause can be, that's a short pause. Or a pause can be an hour-long conversation with someone when you weren't planning to do that. Or it can be a walk in nature, or it can be lying down doing nothing, or it can, it's got to be like a break that gives you spaciousness in some way, so that you drop into a gap. And I would say, like, look at nature. If you watch anything in nature, you'll see that it pauses. Everything, nature's always pausing. The seasons pause, the wind pauses, insects pause. The fly that comes and lands on your knee, and you're like, go away. And then it comes back and it lands again. And you're like, and it comes back. And you're like, why is it doing this? It's because it's inviting you to a pause, because that's what it's doing. It's pausing on you. And all nature pauses. And so when we learn to harvest those pauses, we enter into the contemplative state. And whatever happens in that, it doesn't matter what we do in that state. It doesn't matter if you do a technique or you don't do a technique. That's your freedom. But the point is, you've given yourself a pause, and that's magic. And the more pauses you give yourself, or you find, or you listen to you, or you harvest, then the second phase occurs, is called pivoting. So you have pausing, and then you have pivoting. And pivoting is it can only occur in a pause, right? So if you're not pausing, you can't pivot. And pivot is when something breaks through inside you. It's a little mini awakening. It's an insight or an epiphany or a breakthrough or a satori of some form. Something changes in your view or in your body or in your emotions or in your, you maybe catch one of these shadows in action because you pause. Before you speak, you take a breath. And instead of like firing back, or instead of hitting that email send, bang, you take a breath, and that moment of pause gives you the insight, the space for the insight. And then you have a pivot, and then you respond in a different way. You respond from your intuition, from your heart. And then a very, very different sequence of events follows because you've pivoted, and the more pauses you have, the more pivots you have. And the more pivots that you have, the final phase is called merging. And merging is when our whole being kind of starts to, the edges of our being start to fade a bit, and we start to merge a bit more into the background consciousness. So we start to kind of feel the totality through us, so a bit more of us comes online, a bit more of our wider being, so merging is a long-term process. We're merging more and more and more, but we can only do it through pauses, so it all begins with the pause and the power of the pause. And I explained this process in that little book really, really clearly. And so it's a beautiful thing that anyone can do that has an instant effect on your life. So if you get to the end of today and then you're lying in your bed just before you go to sleep and you think, well, what were the best moments of today? I can guarantee you they were pauses. Guarantee you. Yeah.
Brother, this has been just beautiful today, being with you, you sharing your good work in the world.
Yeah.
Any last things to share with our Warrior Sage family?
Yeah, just
from your pause.
I just want to, I guess, I invite you to, if you're inspired by what you hear or the frequency of my voice or my whatever, if you feel like I'd like to know more, then come and take a look at Gene Keys. You're very welcome. I'm really into cross-pollinating communities and playing. And if you're feeling really brave and bold, then come and do this deep dive into love beginning November. And if your community, it's like if a group of you wanted to come and do it, you could do it. It's a long process. It's over 6 months. But because it's very involved. But as I said, it's in the background of your life, so it's not like it creates a huge kind of problem or commitment, but it has a very deep impact that's kind of builds in themes over the time. So you could support each other as well, is what I'm saying. And I'd love to invite any of you who feel drawn to come and check out genekeys.com, connect with these teachings. I've also got a YouTube channel where I do a lot of stuff. So there's loads of talks and kind of snippets by me. Like I do a lot of snippets, 10-minute talks on different things that come to me and those kind of things. So yeah, come and get engaged and we need to kind of cross-pollinate, and we need to stick together, and we need to build community in the time that lies ahead. That's the most important thing. We're building connections, we're building community, we're building community through authenticity and love and compassion. And then we can be of service. We can be of service to those who really will need us, those right now who need us. There's a lot of people in the world right now who need help. A lot of refugees moving around this world, and people in suffering, and people afraid, and those numbers are going to go up exponentially. You think COVID's going up, the number of people in fear is going to rise more and more steeply. So the more warrior sages we have, the better. So I thank you for all of thank you for the work you're doing, Satyen. I think it's incredible. I really I want to kind of honor you, one teacher to another, that I really feel like you're a trustworthy man. I would trust you. I do trust you. So I think anyone that's listening to you, you know, you're on a good path. Listen to this man.
Likewise, brother. Likewise, we lock arms together as warrior sages, as holders of love on this planet and peace and its highest evolution. And we invite all of us together to be one family and training with each other, supporting each other, training, deepening with each other, sharing with each other, committing to each other's evolution, and we all rise together. So
exactly. So spiritual friendship is what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, family. And there's lots here. Take it in and let's have the pause with this.
Thank you.